All of you that participated to workshops, that was a part that you don't know all about it. So this is the occasion because there was an important part, 2 afternoons, full afternoons working on that. So we will ask the people who were responsible. Some of them is also, we can ask also the students if they have something to add. So I will start with the first one, which was, if I can find my notes, the first one would be the Interoperability Academy workshop. So I called Victoria to come here and to present the debrief.
We are in a setting that may not even look to you like a multitasking setting.
Hello, good morning. I think now today my voice will be a bit louder. Thank you for being here all these days and also seeing also today the room that is almost full. We are really happy about it. So very quickly, I'm the first, unfortunately, so I have to be very quick for the others to have time. So my time is to present the wrap-up for Interoperability Academy workshop that we organized. And also it's one of the, I must say that it's one of the things that is, let's say, initiated a bit, and I have to say the Winter School, because the idea of e-learning and students and combining together professionals and also from private sector, it's something that inspires us a lot. And along with our unit, Interoperability Unit, or ISA², and KU11, we decided to do that. So I will be very brief. I hope I can make it in 7 minutes for my colleagues as well here in the States. So I will really present the objective of this workshop, the key facts and structures that we did to make this workshop, because it was kind of very quick, so in 3 hours. What is Interoperability Academy in a nutshell? Of course, you can find everything online these days, so we don't have to say everything now. How came up the inception phase of the action, and how went the constructive discussion that we have for the workshop. And of course, how you can stay in touch and how we can continue after today and after all these days that we were together here. And we had very interesting discussion and engaging from all of you, and thank you for this. Okay, I think I have already said the majority of them, but what I want to focus here is the main themes of the Academy that we had. So, apart from the outcomes and what is in the Interoperability Academy and so on, we, our team, have identified some key factors that we wanted to share and explore with you in order to start from inception phase to the practical phase of the Academy. So the first was the catalogue of educational training. The second one to try to identify the categories of the material. Then the learning profiles and the learning paths. So this is was the main scope that we had in mind.
Little that I left out. This is most of the chapter, and I think you're doing yourself a favor.
And how that went, I will follow up later on the others. So we had 4 parallel sessions, 2 rooms, with a total 46 participants. On one room it was George Lobo, on the other myself, and our team, Trustees team, that helped us on this. And of course we have participants, and we are very happy for this, from the academia, from students, and from private sector and public sector. And we had a lot of interesting discussion and outcome. So this is how we worked, but you can see that, and you were also there. What I would like to say in this interesting is what is Interoperability Academy. Nowadays we hear a lot the word of academy, Interoperability Academy, e-learning, digital skills gap, all around it. So thus came the idea to try to minimize the digital skill gap on one hand, train the civil servants, because we have already plenty of solutions, but we don't train the servants and they don't use and they don't know our solutions. And then to see how we can provide specialized and targeted online training and training programs. And since it's a new action, the concept started in August, and this August, we are still in the beginning, so in the inception phase, and I'm trying to emphasize this, if I may, because this is a beginning, and we have many things to do. So the main objective is, of course, to raise awareness, what are we doing and why. So we decided in this academy to have ISA and ISA² solutions that we have here all these days, to put them together, which of them have educational resources that we can reuse and how we can train them, how you can learn about them, how you can develop the skills in the area of interoperability, but I will not go in details because all these days you have heard a lot about interoperability. And today I learned something very interesting about interoperability, that it can be also a rose garden. And the development of the new platform that we want to establish soon.
But when we perceive
So what were the outcomes, why we had this workshop?
our brain can
So to see the learning courses and with a variety of techniques that we had identified and see how this fits best in our purpose. So which will be the learning management system and the platform which best fits our needs? It's based on open source and open standards, because what we want to do in the end is something that can be sustainable, can be reused, and can be adapted by all if possible. And then we try to see how organization of schools, seminars, and so on. And then how to have how to make something this to have a certificate and so on. What were the questions? So this was more or less the inception phase, and this is like the 4 basic pillars of our workshop that we had. The duration here it says 5 months, but the 5 months is called the inception phase, which is very short, and we have to act believing very fast with our team. And also the colleagues that contributed a lot help us with giving our solutions, educational material, and trying to help us with the maturity as well. But what was the objective? Yeah, I think I have more 5 minutes or less, so I will be very quick. And the objective was to build on the foundation of this academy. So that was the main outcome, not just to have discussions, to get practical, and soon have the academy of solutions. Now, the outlines of the 5 questions that I said. So the first one was the catalog of educational and training resources. So all participants said that it was very interesting to have all materials in one place. And the search was much easier because all the information is scattered all around. It's very difficult to find. But we need to consider analytical aspect as well. And also we need to take into account the search, how you search those things, and the visual aspect, because the visual aspect is very important, something to be considered appealing, and so you can be attracted as well. And then there were several explanations of the terms and definitions that we want to take into consideration in this first step. The other is, there was a question, if you find the categorization that we have done so far, if it was useful. The majority of the audience said yes, but it will be really, really nice if we have some tagging. So, for instance, if you have tagging like, I don't know, ERA or EIF, then it will help the audience identifying better the solution. And it was coming out of many participants, this one. And of course, we have to specify the target audience, the specialization, and also that was something that, to be honest, we didn't consider initially. But it was the young generation that helped us on this. It was the social aspect. This should be said. So you should take the social inclusion aspect. Very quickly, the training models. Here is the main highlights. Of course, you can follow up with us and the team later. And of course, we have everything public, so you will find this. So in order to be in one order, we have to have the same methodology. This helps the audience to have the same methodology. Don't confuse and combine different. One methodology to be clear for all. But we should have also different approaches while we while we will develop the module. And why I'm saying this? Because although we had different approaches, we should combine it in one module. And this is something there that I would like to mention. It's the goal is to be corresponding to be reached, corresponding to the skills for each person was really important, to try to match the skills with the lessons and the material, the training material that we had. I will be sharp. Then was the curriculum. So we identified 2 different types of curriculum, the knowledge and the skills. So those have to go hand in hand, and it was very interesting to identify. So we should take, and we will take definitely into consideration. Expected topics and courses, well, I would like to say it was a very nice input that they said that you should already try some exercises and best examples that are already out there. So take for what is given out there. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. Take for others have done and let's reuse. Let's combine forces, as some colleagues said from another workshop in the previous days. And the other thing is like to try to have a bridge between knowledge, all of material, learning, and practice. Practice is really, really important. In order to get accustomed to something, to understand it, you need to practice it. Here we added also using videos. People sometimes we are not even reading. We just have the phone and have like a quick video. So it really helps us like initiating something. So the videos and nano learning and mobile learning, it was some of the concepts that we also take into consideration. Then were the learning profiles and learning paths, meaning that what you are from, what is your profile, I don't know, you're an IT developer, you are a CIO, you are a manager, so how you will link into this. And there were like more profiles that we should take into consideration from strategic, legal, operational, business and academic that we didn't identify in the beginning, but we put it in a sub-level of categories. And then the interesting thing that we didn't also put initially, it was the geographical level and size of the public service. We should take into consideration municipalities, local and regional level. That initially we didn't insert that in our search. The other thing was the learning management system standards, that there are so many out there. So we should already, the participants identify several already management system, learning management system, but the most popular among them was Moodle and Elias. So we'll definitely stick and search more about into them to be into the future, because this is the point, is the future. And saying about the future, I would like all of you to stay in touch. Use JoinUp. And stay in touch. It's already, this is the profile, that this is not the academy. If I may, I will use, we are a community of learners. So this is the place that we want to be all together, share practices. So already you will see some examples from Estonia and United Nations University that they put what they are doing. Soon there will be more. And of course, it's the Interoperability Academy in a tiny, tiny box. And also publication officer, I don't know, somewhere is over there, the colleagues from Luxembourg. So it's some webinars that you already did, and they have plenty of materials for this. I think this is it. Of course, you can stay in touch as always with ISA, because ISA is our umbrella of solutions, and that is why we're here. Thank you very much for this engaging discussion and the workshops that we had together. Thank you.
Thanks, Victoria, for this very good work and inspiring. And so it's just starting, and we really need your help to do that. So thank you very much. I will call now Miguel Alvarez to explain about EIF.
Okay. And the count is
thank you. Thank you very much, George, and all the students for attending all these working sessions. I'm going to present the session, the 4 sessions actually that we had on Wednesday afternoon on the EIF, the European Interoperability Framework. For those that didn't attend the sessions, the EIF is the European Interoperability Framework, and for us, sorry for this analogy, but it's like the Bible. It's the Bible of interoperability in Europe. Conceptually speaking, it's a breakthrough because it helps administrations to conceptualize why interoperability is needed and the steps that need to be taken. And it's, I would say, it's even more enriched than the Bible, because instead of 10 commandments, we have 12 principles and 47 recommendations. So we have to preach every day on these principles and recommendations on interoperability. There will be drama later on, certainly. We had students from all over Europe, but also students from outside. We had one student from Colombia, from the Philippines, another one, countries outside the European Union. What is good to get also different visions out of these European Union common frameworks and common policies that sometimes lead to common mindsets. The discussions were directed to 2 types of topics. At the beginning, certainly we introduced the framework, but we introduced the framework by providing, let's say, given a practical example, but that, by the way, is in place in Flanders, is a new service, a new digital service, a child allowance, when there is a new baby born in one country, and the parents, they have to undergo all the lengthy procedures for different reasons. So we presented this case, a child allowance, and the students had like 10 minutes to think about what are the main challenges to implement this kind of cross-domain service, interconnecting base registries, once only principal, and so on. So thanks to this feedback, the students were already in the right mood to understand why conceptually the EIF could help to figure out what could be the best strategy to implement this kind of cross-cutting, cross-domain digital service. And finally, and this is the interesting topic for now, for the wrap-up session, we ask the students, after this overview, quick overview, because we had almost 1 hour to go through the EIF, what are the things that are missing in the EIF, or how the EIF should evolve? So starting by the good news, and the drama will come later on. The good news is that it's well perceived. It's perceived as a very valid instrument. And indeed, the concept of interoperability is not that old, started a few years ago. So it's important that we pass through the message to the different organizations in public sector, particularly, that is our domain in the Commission, but also SMEs and so on, that interoperability, what is interoperability and how to achieve interoperability. The other good news is that the Slovenian representative basically considers that having an observatory on interoperability is fundamental to understand where we stand in public administration in the European Union and beyond. The drama. Drama, but very constructive drama that certainly will be taken into account for the EIF evaluation that will start running next year. We need to revisit the EIF. We are missing a little bit the motivation. We need to explain maybe in a more clear way what is the motivation behind the EIF. There were suggestions to link the EIF to innovative technologies, emerging technologies like blockchain and artificial intelligence to help to convince policymakers and in general other types of profiles, lawyers or whatever, that interoperability is needed. The motivation or the rationale needs also to take into account the societal changes, and probably the new, one of the new priorities in the new Commission will be the Green Deal. So maybe it's another positive message that we need to reinforce that digitalization, the benefits linked to interoperability could help to reduce the CO2 footprint. So we need to find valid arguments also to convince policymakers and the society, the citizens, of course. Some voices recommended to go beyond mere recommendations, to do something more mandatory, obligatory, but it's a touchy topic. Other valid feedback was that we should provide guidance on how to create specific domain frameworks on interoperability derived from this umbrella one. So it's also a very valid comment, how to align and to create more specific cross-domain and domain-specific frameworks. There were also comments on the, and it's very much linked to what Victoria presented, the IT layer, sorry, the technological layer that maybe it should be decoupled a little bit more in detail. And also, we should try to embed the 4 layers into the conceptual model. The conceptual model is a bit decoupled from the 4 layers, so to help people to understand how these 4 layers, the legal, the semantic, the organizational, and the technical layer are part, and the role that they should play in the conceptual model. Also the interactions between the layers, because certainly there is overlapping between certain layers, but also how these layers should interact between themselves. The organizational layer and the legal layer, they are tightly coupled, so it's another important remark. another remark is we need also to provide guidelines, because a common situation is that interoperability is not feasible because we are connecting organizations that are at different maturity levels. So how to align maturity from an interoperability point of view. And finally, a positive comment is that the framework remains technology agnostic, so people consider that it's better to keep it generic, and then domain specific or different frameworks, detailed frameworks could describe more in detail the kind of standards and open standards, open specifications that should be needed. And that's it. That's in a nutshell what we discuss. So thank you.
Thanks, Miguel. I admire your courage to redefine the Bible in a Catholic university. It takes some courage. And and I want to say as well, as Victoria said, there will be, as Miguel announced, there will be next year start evaluation of the EIF, the implementation. This is done, if you want to follow, it's still also on JoinUp. There is a collection called National Interoperability Framework Observatory, NIFO short name. And there, if there are any workshops or any requests for feedback, etc., if you follow this collection, you will be able to follow and to participate and to give your opinion again when the time comes. So please stay in touch. So I will call Dr. Raul Abril to explain about EIRA.
Thank you, George. Thank you, colleagues. Okay, when I was invited to this wrap-up, I tried to think what could be the value that I could provide. And then I hope rightly identify that the main potential value will be for those of you that unfortunately you couldn't attend my basically presentation. By the way, I think you lost a great opportunity, but okay. I also want to take the opportunity here to say to my colleagues, George and Victoria, and also Jup and Maxim, thank you very much for helping me to do the job. So I really appreciate it. And I want a big clap for them because you did a great job. Thank you very much. So going to the rock and roll, I was talking about EIRA. Basically, when I found two types of attendance, I realized that the challenge was I had students and I had senior people, some of them colleagues of me that I am meeting in member states. So the suggestion for me was to deliver a masterclass level, which is what I did. So for those of you that are the students, remember that on Monday we have a follow-up session for the assignments between 2 and 3 hours of WebEx where you will get your assignments, which I will evaluate later. In terms of the presentation that I had the opportunity to deliver, I wanted to promote, and I do not know if I manage to promote the critical thinking of my attendants, and basically to be very critical and asking the whys. And I use a lot the presentations that my colleagues deliver in the morning to take basically as a base for discussion. So I focus in my presentation, in my lecturing on the, basically in a methodological approach on the problems of lack of interoperability to address finally the concept of interoperability with some close examples. And I mean, I was really happy this morning with Professor Gert explaining about cost and basically analysis benefit, because we were touching yesterday this concept and the challenges on value. In fact, if you go to the webpage of our probably the most efficient unit in the entire commission, which is ISA, you will see the dashboard, the ISA² dashboard, which is entirely based on the framework of Professor Gert. You will see that in the webpage. So we are talking about real things. The other important concept that I wanted to basically to communicate was to demystify the concept of digital public services, to make that very close, to understand the value. And finally, I think that what I would really like now is, instead of me summarizing this thing, I would kindly invite one representative of the students that participated to offer, the mic is going to fly. If there is any student of the master that would like to say something, I think that Isadora wants to say something in the other side. Or, well, I would like first a student to say something and basically share with us what you learn, which is what matters, not what I say.
Thank you. Well, first I would like to thank Professor Dr. Abril for giving such an understandable insight on the EIRA. He gave us a master level lecture on each of the whys of EIRA. He explained us why it is a European, why it is interoperability, why it is a reference architecture. So he also told us to learn from the people who know about it. So he explained us the origins in the security and defense industry. And he also presented to us very clear models on each of the dimensions of EIRA. He, most importantly, shared with us very valuable material to further our research on the topic. So thank you.
Thank you. And now I would like a senior representative, which maybe is another angle.
Multitasking, or the costs of multitasking, can emerge.
Hello? Yes, hello. I'm Willem van Gemert from the Publications Office in Luxembourg. So I had the pleasure yesterday to participate in this masterclass from Raul. And I have to admit that in the beginning I was a bit skeptical to have a 3-hour, one-directional lecture, but it turned out to be very interesting because Raul is very passionate about the subject. He knows incredibly much about it, and he shared it with the group. So in the beginning he presented a list of, I think it was 80 sources, and the room went quiet when he said, "You're all expected to have read all these 80 sources for Monday." So I have to say, all these years I have come in touch with EIRA, but I never fully grasped what it was about and how it could be used. And so after these 3 hours, I can say that I now finally understand it. So I think it would be really worth to repeat these kind of lectures. At the same time, I'm glad that I'm not a student and that I have to give an exam on this matter because it is quite complex. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else would like to comment?
So far, we know
no one?
interval.
So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Raul, and be ready to repeat because apparently we will have to. So I will call now a colleague from DG Connect to talk about the workshop on the second day. It was more design thinking workshop about digital Europe supporting public administration. So Dietmar.
Durations in the second and in the sub-second rank. And they showed.
Yeah, okay, thanks. Of course, I'm just presenting here, and all the intellectual work was done by the participants. The faults are, of course, my own, so I hope I get it halfway right. What we were about to do yesterday was to put, or it was entitled Digital Europe Supporting Public Administration, and we wanted to see how a digital transformation of the public administration can be put into a program. And because really, there's all this nice theory, but you have to actually get the actions organized, and that means they have to think about how to structure it so that it gives you a coherent set. And what we did is we chose just one of the possible approaches to do that, and borrowed a few terms and few patterns from log frame analysis, which some of you might have heard about, which is just to think about the outputs, the tangible impacts that you can achieve with concrete projects, to talk about the outcomes, meaning what positive changes you really want to do and what you want to bring about with the projects you do, and ultimately which goals you want to work towards. And we had very fruitful discussions because what we did is we sorted ideas that we had generated in a brainstorming session to fall into those categories and see where were missing links, where were there projects that for which we didn't yet have goals, or where were goals for which we hadn't come up with ideas for projects yet. And in this way we generated quite a few ideas that would be far too much to list all. So I would just like to give a few examples that came up, given the nature of the audience, with all the international mobile students and also the EU officials that have been that have come to Brussels from various countries. It's not surprising that virtual or real mobility featured relatively high in the priorities, and there were interesting actions proposed. From holographic meetings that could be enabled with modern technology and reduce the need to travel to EU meetings, all the way to integrated train databases that would facilitate sustainable land travel to get to meetings. And of course, we discussed the obstacles and also the ways to actually arrive there. Other ideas were to scale the idea of a web page for personal data access, as it exists in several member states already, onto a European scale, that you could really address all the data available or stored in various European countries on yourself through a single web page. Or another idea is the integration of static and dynamic European data sets into what would amount to the future replacement of official statistics that you could readily use across Europe. There are, of course, also new outcomes, new positive changes, or rather even questioning traditional ones. An idea was the idea of the one-stop shop, which was challenged in discussions in the context of user centricity, because actually could the one-stop shop not become too confusing for the citizens to actually use, and would no wrong door approach not be more appropriate? I think that was a very interesting thing. And of course, it was also new goals and principles. We compared what we had come up with the goals as they are specified in the Government Action Plan and the Tallinn Declaration, but also in the Digital Europe program itself, which of course has to be very brief because it covers so much more than just the digital transition of government. So actually what you find there's relatively little. And ideas that were mentioned there was a change management approach, both at the EU and the member states level for the future e-gov policy, or timeliness as a goal, that the government needs to keep pace with technological developments, digital education, that we have just heard even more, but also needs-driven digital services. There was quite a bit of work done also on indicators and measurements that could be employed to actually test whether goals or outcomes have been achieved. And of course, there were also discussions of the risks or the assumptions that go along with everything you think up, and which you better make yourself aware before. I have to confess now that this is actually taken out of just 2 of the 3 groups that we have, that we ran. But fortunately, we have Colin, who can also give a voice to the younger generation that was very present there.
Thank you very much, Dietmar, and also thanks for the excellent introduction to what we were doing. So indeed, we follow the design method, so we had to come up with ideas for the future and to identify gaps. And what I really enjoyed about the ideas and the discussions we had in the start, they followed very well the discussions in the plenary session. So how to actually get it done and how to convince others to take up the digital services and what are still the gaps, such as skills and communication, and there were plenty, the whole sheet was full, but we had to choose between the most inspirational projects in our group, and we focused on 3. So one of the discussions was about how to improve the legal interoperability. There were a lot of discussions about the technical and the semantical already, but this group wanted to focus on the legal interoperability. So how can we make it also easier? The example was given with new EU regulation. How can we make it easier for governments to already do an ex-ante impact assessment? Which laws can be affected? And if the system is well designed, I think the term machine-readable law was mentioned, and that was quite an interesting idea. Another an idea that we were focusing on was about the digital skills improvement, and here were 3 different target groups are given: the children, civil servants, and the general population, and they both have different needs and have different programs. The digital skills for children are, you can build it up, was mentioned, so they can do more and more coding and maybe more advanced lectures. But the general population, they need to be able to use digital services, so they have different needs and different programs. Civil servants, on the other hand, they have to build new public services, so just understanding how to use Word is not enough for them. They need to have a digital mindset. So we were discussing, like, okay, how can we improve these training programs tailored towards these different needs? And one of the more concrete projects that were discussed also was on making a national UI kit. So that was so that every websites of each member state, regardless of administrative level, looks in the same format, but content can be tweaked according to the needs of the organization. But that every person sees right from the start, aha, this is a government website, and has the same layout and the same kind of functionality. So it makes it easier and more accessible to find the services they need. But like mentioned in the start, now we had to also think of the implementation and the risks. And there were so many, it's too hard to say, but there are plenty of implementation risks and assumptions, and it is not always easy in the case of having a website that also the target group is actually using the website. One of the assumptions we highlighted was that having a better website doesn't mean that everything gets better. Poverty is not reduced by having a better website, but it can allow them to find the services they need, and that is the focus group. And one of the final ideas we discussed to increase the awareness, and it was based on the Code Week, which is already in a lot of countries, to have a Digital Government Week, where we show real benefits, real solutions that work and are there and have inspirational effects. So not just solutions that they could use, but actual processes and services that are there and have empirical validation. And if you put everyone like this, now it's 3 days, but if they do it for a week, it can be very inspirational, and they take home a lot of knowledge and ideas. So perhaps for the next year we can have a Digital Government Week as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Dietmar and Colin. It was very interesting, I guess, and I'm glad that you appreciate it. Now I'm calling for the last session, Maxim, Chantillon, who for a moment had both had because he's a former trainee, and I guess one of the sessions was shared also by somebody with a double hat, Vasilios Peristeras, who is both digit but as well a professor here, so I guess he was using his professor hat yesterday.
Thank you, thank you. So first of all, I would like to mention that indeed the workshop was led by Professor Kromfoot. My colleague Stan Wouters also, who is in the back. So Vasilios Peristeros, Dr. Vasilios Peristeros, who is indeed also from the European Commission, and myself. We had two groups of around 20 people. And we discussed the future of digital transformation. What is digital transformation? What does it mean for different public administrations? What are the factors influencing the digital transformation? And to do this, we started by giving a brief academic conceptualization of what digital transformation is. And we tried to show actually that digital transformation is very often used by public administrations to show or to frame what they would like to achieve, but it's also a very broad and difficult concept to grasp. So we started therefore first with a few definitions to show how difficult it is to understand this concept. What came back from the different definitions, because that was also one of the aims of the workshop, was to think about what is digital transformation. And from the audience, we learned actually that there were a number of factors which are important there. Disruption is something which is part of a digital transformation. We also have the need for strategic responses provided by public administrations. There is the importance of value creation. Value creation, which was yesterday also mentioned in one of the presentations by Dr. Ines Merkel, is one of the aims of a public administration. And in a digital transformation, the public value creation is something which is crucial to think about from the start. And then finally, there is also the need to deal with structural changes in your public administration. Digital transformation is not just redefining your public service from an analog to a digital process by using technology, but it's about rethinking your entire way of providing a public service and questioning actually why you are providing a public service. With the different participants, so we divided them in 4 different groups per room, so we had in total 8 groups. Of around 4 to 5 people, we conducted a SWOT analysis. And the first question was actually like, okay, think about the concept of digital transformation from your own country perspective, from your own organization, and look at what for you is actually digital transformation. And the participants came up with a number of elements, factors which influence the digital transformation, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And I would like to, for each of those 4 elements, give you a number of ideas of what was said. So for the strength, we had the fact that there is overall political support. Administrations in Europe are supported by their politicians to ensure that there is a digitalization of what they are doing. This is something what was seen as positive. There is also a coordinated EU effort, and this was something which was also seen as something remarkable. There is a clear strategic vision of where the EU and the different member states should go to. This was also a strength for them. There is also, and this is quite important, a trust in governments. In the European Union or in the EU, it's a European way of looking at citizens and the relation to governments. There is actually a trust in government. Yeah, if you look, for example, at the US, there the trust from citizens in governments is much lower. So it was seen as a strength that public administrations can make use of this trust and should not lose this trust when they perform a digital transformation. There were also the technological developments which are constantly ongoing, which are also seen as a strength. And there is also the existence of legal instruments, such as the GDPR, which is seen as an important element for the protection of the security and privacy of the citizens, which is also something which is maybe on other continents lacking, and we can be proud in Europe that we have this kind of legislation. Now, there were also a number of weaknesses, such as the rigidity of public services and the stability for some, to others the rigidity of the public sector. There is also the existence of silos, which we still see in various public administrations, but let's be honest, it's not just public administration, also in the private sector we see that there are silos.
So, to translate,
there are differences in the levels of maturity between the different EU member states, which are also quite important, and which was also mentioned, there is a lack of implementation. Very often administrations have nice strategic visions, but in the end the implementation is something which is very often pretty difficult for them to achieve. Yeah. And finally, legal needs are still there. On the opportunities, one of the interesting things that was mentioned was actually the idea of IT diplomacy. Europe has an interesting view on what digitalization is.
even if they are good drivers.
China, the US, for example, have a very clear focus on what they want technology to be in the world. It could be interesting as an opportunity for also the EU to take a more proactive role on what IT diplomacy could be and how we can actually spread the digital transformation from a European perspective to the rest of the world. There is also the idea that there is still quite a lot of money at the European level to support the digital transformation of member states, so that was also something which is seen as an opportunity. And there was also the idea that maybe it could be interesting to create more competition among the different member states and the different public administrations that we see and that we have in Europe, by benchmarking them even more, by having independent authorities which can manage actually what the digital transformation is of the different EU member states. Now, there were also a number of threats which were mentioned. For example, culture of resistance from public administrations to change the way they offer public services, digital divide which still exists among citizens, not just among European member states, but also within EU member states. We still see that this is something that needs to be covered. Then something what was already mentioned on the IT diplomacy, so the role that the US and China are taking, where Europe is maybe lacking a bit behind from a diplomatic perspective. There is also this idea of a lack of standardization. It could be good to have more standardization. Maybe the EU can do also something about that, was one of the ideas. Now, what were the lessons learned? Well, that was interesting because the SWOT analysis was very broad. A lot of ideas were mentioned by all the different participants, but then we came actually to the lessons learned and what actually needs to be done. What are now the 5 or 4 key elements? And there we saw that all the different groups were coming together. The first one was the building up of skills. Not just from an educational perspective in primary, secondary, and university teaching, but also in a lifelong learning perspective. And I think in that perspective, the Interoperability Academy was something which was very important and which was seen as a positive development. It's not only about IT, it's also about legal skills, it's about policy skills, about project management skills. It's a broad variety of skills that people will need in public administrations, in the private sector, in your society, in order to ensure there can be a digital transformation. There was also the idea of bringing your citizens closer to the policy making. We've seen yesterday also that there are new ideas on co-creation, co-production, and it's up to public administrations now to see how this can be managed. Although it should also be underlined that it's pretty difficult for public administrations to make this connection to citizens. Yeah? Use the trust was also something which was mentioned. And there is, of course, law. Focus on your legal frameworks, not just on the future legislation that you're writing, but also on the past legislation which is in force already and which can very often inhibit the digital transformation of your public administration. And finally, there were the costs. And this was something which was also mentioned today by Professor Buchart. Don't see it as a cost, but see it more as an opportunity. Invest in it. And don't see it as a burden that you need to carry with you, but see it as an investment in your future. So, thank you. Maybe there are some students or others who would like to contribute, who attended the workshop, or was it okay? So, if so, thank you.